So I know, Angela, you do a lot of work within the corporate wellness sector, and then you also work with a lot of high performers. Like when you're working with somebody, I'm sure people come in with a vast array of either issues or concerns or things that they're looking to optimize or work on. For you, what are the key areas that you're looking at? So, I mean, where do you kind of start as the basis or foundation for health? Like, do you start more on the physiological side of things by running tests or having them kind of examine their nutritional quality? Do you look at more of the exercise behavioral components, or do you look at like the psychological components? Where's your foundation? Or maybe it's all of the above.
It kind of depends. So it depends on why people are coming to me. So if I'm working with them on a one-to-one basis, for example, with like successful entrepreneurs or leaders in companies, then I'm looking at, they're always looking to get to the next level, right? They often actually are pretty dialed in. Sometimes they'll have a health problem, but it's rare that I would get a client in that situation that say needs to lose, I don't know, like 50 pounds in weight or something, because they've actually been pretty well optimized, but now they just want to get to the next level and the next level, because they want that peak, like levels of concentration, but they're not always able to deliver the same consistency that they've been wanting. And sometimes they're pushing too hard, which you commonly see, right, with HRV, is they're actually going to the other extreme. And I'm just saying, no, we just need to dial things back, because you're missing out on things like creativity. You know, if you're really, your HRV is tanking and you're not getting enough sleep and you're pushing yourself too far, you actually don't perform as better, because the first thing that I see that goes in that situation is you can methodically perform a task, but you've lost your creativity. And people in those positions, that's really what they're paid for, right? Is that element of their work and their expertise. So I look at them more as a whole. We will often run some tests and some panels. In terms of their diet, their nutrition, I will normally incorporate their genetics as part of that. I find it's really foundational, because it kind of tells me where to go and hunt a little bit further, right? So if they've got some health problems that are showing up and we can see, you know, that they're not at the body composition they want, actually finding that maybe there's somebody who has been doing something more of a ketogenic and low carb style diet, and then we find out they're highly sensitive to fats, and this is why they can't release that extra bit of weight or have that performance that they were looking for. So I do things like, you know, DNA testing, or I look at more functional labs, so organic acid testing, gut testing. Hormone testing is a really common one, particularly with the women that I work with, because you can see so much. So, you know, even looking at, like with stress, when we're looking at that, I can see, you know, what stage of depletion are they in? Like, is their body meeting the physical demands at the moment? So we might see that cortisol's high, but is DHEA, another hormone, which you know is pro-anabolic hormone, is that keeping up with demand? Because if it's matching their cortisol, then we know they're keeping up. It doesn't mean they'll stay keeping up forever. But actually, if DHEA is tanking, and maybe they're producing tons of cortisol, but the body is somehow limiting what's freely available in their saliva, we know they need support. So I do like to use lab work, because it allows me to be very targeted with them in terms of what they need. That's obviously not suitable in a corporate setting, right? You can't do that with that many people. That's more on a one-to-one.
Unless they just have a ton of money and they're really bought in.
Yeah, exactly. And they're just going to do all those labs for everyone. But there are principles that, you know, everyone can apply. And so I have this approach that I call SHIFT, and I break it down for them, where, you know, the S is for sleep. So looking at sleep and how, because I feel like that's the foundation of everything, and it makes everything so much easier. And then the H is for hormones. And so I explain to them the different hormones, not just stress hormones, sex hormones, but hunger hormones, and how that plays together. And then the I is the insights, where we discuss things like biohacking, using things like an aura ring, different even just journaling insights they can gather, and lab testing. And then the F is around fuel. So it's like, how can you fuel your body? And that is, you know, a four-pronged approach. So for people listening, the acronym I use is FLOW, right? So it's like food, light, oxygen, and water. How can you hit those parameters? Because that's the way you fuel your body. And then the last component is the T. So that is training your body and mind. And it's very much body and mind. So because that kind of helps you make that shift, right? So.
Yeah, indeed. I'd love to break down this concept of enhancing our adaptability to stress and stress resiliency utilizing your shift model. Because when you were referring and describing the shift model, I was thinking about how I previously have worked with clientele and basically walked through a very similar model. I didn't use your acronym. I don't want you suing me for, trademark infringement. But one of the things that I did use was a lot of the concepts that you referred to. And so people might hear something like, food, light, oxygen, water that you mentioned. And like, how in the world does that relate to stress? Well, it actually could have a lot to do with stress. And the one that you mentioned too, which I also agree, and I've spoken very openly on this podcast and other podcasts that I've done, that the foundation really to all of this, I truly do believe, is sleep. Because you can have everything else in line with your health, and you can be doing everything for food and for exercise and for all the biohacks in the world you want. But if your sleep is crap, then like it's going to negate everything else that you're doing. It's not to say all those other things are bad, but you've got to make sure that you have the basis of sleep as really the core foundation of health. So let's talk about this concept of stress resiliency, because I can only imagine, especially when you work within the corporate wellness sector, that it seems like a major topic, if not the major topic, would be this idea of stress, this idea of burnout. How do we create more fortitude and resiliency around stress or adapt to the stressors that we encounter? So maybe it would be helpful for you just to tell a little bit about how you approach stress, how you approach stress resiliency, maybe even through like the lens of your shift model.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that. So I think one of the things with stress, the first thing that I always teach people is stress isn't necessarily bad. And Kelly McGonigal talks about this in detail, and her TED Talks and her work on this is amazing, because actually, if you believe that stress is bad for you, it's going to be so much worse for you and for your health outcomes than if you don't. And I think, we can approach stress very differently. So some stress is good, right? And you and I both talk all the time about hormesis, which is creating deliberate stress to make the body stronger and more resilient. That's what where resilience comes from. However, if you are doing too much of it, then you're going to start moving into more of a depletion model. And I think that you can sort of use the athletic training terms to really help with this, right? So we know that there's a difference when an athlete is overreaching compared to when they're overtraining. And if you are functionally overreaching, you are doing enough to create a response that's going to make your body or mind or both stronger. But if you're now non-functionally overreaching, you've tipped into that balance where you're just pushing too hard. And you see that. And I think you very cleverly pointed out on my show that if you see your HRV tank by 20%, you're kind of moving now into that, quite sort of crossing the boundary between functional and non-functional overreaching. Whereas when you go like 40%,
nervous system is experiencing that allostatic load.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas when you start moving into like 40% or below, are you now tipping into overtraining? And that's really what we're thinking about in the corporate world in terms of burnout. Now, that's a much harder ship to turn around. And the work that I had to do, when you've burnt yourself out to the point that you're hospitalized in pneumonia, it's going to take a long time, and it took years to get back. So we don't want people to go all the way there. And I think just helping them understand the parameters of where things are going and how they can bring it back. And sleep is definitely a huge, huge part in that. But also understanding that if you push all of the time and you don't have recovery cycles, your body will force you to recover. So it actually becomes a zero-sum game. And you see this all the time. Like, one of the most common thing in people who work for large corporations is social jet lag, where they push all week, and they're out, they're entertaining, they're doing everything, they're working super hard, they're surviving on sort of 5 hours of sleep a night. And then at the weekend, they're like, oh my God, Saturday morning, I find it so hard to get out of bed. My family hate me. My partner hates me. I don't spend any time with them. And they just try to recover. The body's really compensating. And then they do it again. Or they book a holiday, and now they're sick on the holiday. You know what it's like, right? It's so common. And I think corporations don't support their staff enough. Whereas if you look at actually when you're a resilient individual with a really good structure of building in a foundational schedule that has the yin and the yang, has the pushing, but has the recovery cycles, you will have much higher levels of sustained performance on a consistent basis.
Yes.
And I think that's
I like
the
that.
key.